Live on DAZN Worldwide, April 26th, Eubank Jr versus Benn. 30 years of rivalry and hatred.
I do hate him.
All comes down to this. The next generation, a new destroyer. For family, history, legacy. Eubank Jr versus Benn, April 26th. Buy now at DAZN.com/boxing.
Alright, so the dust is well and truly settled on Benn Whittaker versus Liam Cameron, and lots being said about Benn Whittaker. There was a lot of people having a go at him over his post-fight reaction, where he went over to Grant Smith and just shouted at him. People were saying he spat. No, he didn't. Listen, Benn Whittaker's an interesting one for me. He received a lot of criticism, and to be honest with you, I'm probably going to name this video Benn Whittaker did deserve the criticism. He did. You know, he was, and I'm sure he still is. I'm sure there is still a touch of arrogance. I mean, there's really, in a sport like boxing, having an ego and having arrogance, there's not actually anything wrong with that necessarily. The problem is when the arrogance goes over. There's a fine line between arrogance, you know, where there's good arrogance, and then you're just delusion. You know, where you believe so well that I'm going to win this fight, but then it goes into just something else altogether. And I think last year was case in point with Benn Whittaker. Even prior to the fight with Liam Cameron, you know, he had Sugar Hill Stewart, who is a good trainer. I respect Sugar Hill Stewart immensely. I think he's a great trainer. And he got rid of Sugar Hill Stewart. And obviously, like, the ins and outs of it, we don't know that. We know that Sugar Hill is based in Detroit, Michigan, which is in America. And obviously, I didn't know it. I actually didn't realize this. With Benn Whittaker, apparently he's got 2 young daughters. So, you know, geographically, that's going to be difficult, especially if you have to, because you can't just, you know, go over to America and come home once a week, or it's just not going to work. So I can understand why he split, but he went and didn't do anything trainer-wise. It was literally just, you know, get someone in the corner. I know it all, this, that, and the other. And, well, it didn't happen. It didn't work for him, because he had some lackluster performances. And then against Liam Cameron, he was getting outboxed. He didn't look right at all. And in my opinion, he was looking for a way, a justifiable way out of that fight. I don't know what kind of pain he was in when they tumbled over the ring ropes. You know, again, for me, it didn't look anything too spectacular, too major. And then the way he was behaving subsequently after it, you know, I think, didn't he say he smashed the fan's phone in the airport or something like that for, you know, coming over and asking for a picture or something. And it did seem as though Benn Whittaker, he needed a good, long, hard look in the mirror, needed a good, long, hard reset. He now has that with Andy Lee. I think that absolutely, with the way he was carrying on last year, with the way he handled the fallout of the Liam Cameron fight, I do genuinely believe he did deserve that level of criticism. However, going into this fight, I was in the minority of people, not necessarily picking Benn Whittaker, but picking Benn Whittaker and picking him very confidently. A lot of people, judging by live streams we were seeing and people, you know, stuff like that, it seemed almost as if the majority were picking Liam Cameron. And my rationale with that, why I feel the majority maybe were picking Liam Cameron, is because Benn Whittaker, and I said this years ago, he is the kind of character where he'll rub you up the wrong way. I had a feeling that fans wouldn't necessarily take to him as a pro, not necessarily because of his style, but just because of his personality, because of his cockiness. And I reckon the reason why so many people were going for Liam Cameron in this immediate rematch was given the fact that, obviously he did well first time, but I think a lot of it was their dislike of Benn Whittaker. And, you know, I mean, I've never had an issue with Benn. I don't know him as a person, obviously, but for me, I've never looked at Benn Whittaker. I've always just thought, okay, he's cocky, you know, he's cocky, but that doesn't bother me, you know. In the ring, I thought he had some talent, and I think he still does. I think that he is a fighter where mentally he needs to be a little bit more switched on. I think he knows that now, and I think Andy Lee is the man to do it. Andy Lee was able to get Benn Whittaker calm after the fight, go over, apologise, all that with Grant Smith, which he duly did. And I think he's found a really good place, Benn Whittaker. In terms of the fight, I've talked about it at length. I did a post-fight review. I talked about it briefly this morning on Review of the Week. I don't need to go into too much detail on it. I thought it was a good performance. Started out a little bit nervous, took a couple of jabs from Liam Cameron, but ultimately he was able to come good. And the fight was prematurely stopped, it has to be said. But to be honest with you, judging by how it was going, I think the writing was pretty much on the wall for Liam Cameron in that fight. He probably would have got stopped sooner rather than later in that fight anyway. So Benn Whittaker, all the praise in the world for coming back. I know it wasn't a loss, and we got to remember, he didn't lose to Liam Cameron. Many people feel he should have, that the fight, he lost enough rounds in that fight that he should have lost, but it was a draw. His O remains intact, and He's really right at that wrong with Liam Cameron this time around. So credit to Ben Whittaker. I am looking forward to seeing what they do next with him, because I think that there is miles in Ben Whittaker. I think that under this new partnership he has with Andy Lee, I think I can see him going places. I don't know, is he going to be necessarily a world champion or anything like that? The jury's out on that one. But could he go and conquer British title level? Yes. Could he go on to European level? Yes. Could I see him in there at world level? I don't see why not. I look at guys like Dan Aziz, Craig Richards, and I think, okay, the tough nights work, don't get me wrong, but let's put Ben Whittaker in with those guys. Craig Richards is a solid, Dan Aziz, if you think about it like this, Dan Aziz, no disrespect, is a solid European level fighter on his day. But he's a solid British level fighter. Craig Richards, I would say, is European level thereabouts. So if you can go in there and look good against those two guys and do a job on those two, well then we've got something up our sleeve here now for you. In terms of Ben Whittaker, though, a lot of people were saying he's struggling at the weight, and he did look very lean in there even on fight night. So I do wonder how long he'll be at 175 pounds. And the problem with a jump to cruiserweight, unless you really are absolutely draining yourself. I mean, a good example, I forgot to mention this actually, Sergey Kovalev fought on Friday night, stopped Arthur Man in 7 rounds over there in Eubank. And Kovalev, I think, weighed in way under the cruiserweight limit, way under. So you see the jump from someone who's maybe struggling a bit at light heavyweight to cruiserweight. I mean, it's night and day. It's such a massive jump that not everyone can do it. Tony Bellew was a heavyweight as an amateur. So for him, it was just like, I'm coming back to my real weight. But other guys, it's tricky, it's difficult. And it's difficult for cruiserweights who are not big. And Isaac Chamberlain, I think now he's more a fully fledged cruiserweight. But back in the day, he was clearly too big for light heavyweight, but he clearly lacked the size to compete with these cruiserweights. So it's a big jump for someone like a Ben Whittaker, should he ever wish to move up, which I think he probably will inevitably end up doing. So there's a lot there to talk about in the future, but for now we focus on the present, and I think it was a great performance last night by Ben Whittaker. He did deserve the criticism last year, I certainly do believe that, but moving forward, I think Ben Whittaker, the road he was going down in 2024, not in terms of anything bad, substance related or anything like that, of course not, certainly not, but just mentally the road he was going down in 24, I think he's right on the right path now. We can have that here, we can write it off, we can rip up the script and say, there you go, chuck it in the bin. 2025, I think, is starting off on the right path. Let me know your thoughts on Ben Whittaker in the comments section below. Do you think that this was just an anomaly, or do you actually think that, no, the sky is looking a lot brighter for Whittaker and his team? Let me know your thoughts. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace.